Hello, everyone. This is Baruti Carl Alexander, and we have a treat today in our special spotlight conversation that we too do from time to time. This is our spotlight show, and we do that from time to time when we have very interesting and profound guests. And we have that treat today, and we look forward to the conversation with my brother Ron Angeletti, who just wrote a book called Climb, Uplift and Build. And we're going to get into that, and it's going to be a very important conversation in these times that we live in. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Everything's really good. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad that we have you on to talk about these important things. Um, at the top of your book, at the top of your bio on the site, it talks about survive, discovery, and triumph. In the context of the times we're living in, what are you trying to say with those three terms put together? And that's self-discovery. What are you trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Self-discovery, I mean, I think is definitely the key to any progress, right? Really getting to know thyself, right? That's what it's about, right? So we are all created beings, right? And considering that we created, there's a creator, and I'm a firm believer. And so self-discovery begins with really understanding that we're not just here haphazardly, right? I don't subscribe to there was, some, and not to be religious about it, it's not just a bang and we exist. I firmly believe that, before we was formed, we was, right? And so it's our responsibility, that is a lifelong journey, right? So it's not a matter of self-discovery. I know myself, I'm done. I mean, knowing thyself is becoming, right? It's a lifelong journey, and our responsibility is to continue to get to know ourselves so that we can make those responsible decisions that ultimately lead to our progress and our success. Absolutely.
As you say that, these times, more than any other we can think of, in my opinion, are times where we have so many different things coming at us to try to tell us who we are.
Mm-hmm.
You have TV, which has always been something that has tried to tell you who you are. It tells you you could be great. Then it tells you could be great in 15 minutes, but it then tells you things don't always work out, and you don't hardly know what to believe. Then we have social media,
Mm-hmm.
which people will tell you anything on social media. So it's hard for our people to, unless they do what we used to do, what our grandfathers used to do, is read. So how can people know who they are?
Yep. Again, knowing thyself, it does require some level of being coachable, right? Being willing to take some form of uh, uh, um, instruction, what we like to call constructive criticism, even, right? And in our society, unfortunately, even that term criticism has a negative connotation when it really shouldn't, right? Because criticism, and there's a difference between condemnation and criticism, or somebody is condemning just to tear a person down versus constructive mean to build, right? Think of the word construct. We see construct is to build, right? Construction workers build. So the idea of being willing to take that constructive criticism, being willing to look at, not just look at the mirror, but if someone is holding up that mirror to you, being willing to look into it and pivot and make those necessary steps, right? And so you mentioned that so much is happening, especially in this day and time, right? So there's really nothing new under the sun. So much is going on, but so much has always been going on. We just living in a day and time where it's information highway, right? Is at an all-time high. You get information, pretty much by the time it hit, it's old news by 5 o'clock. Even when I grew up, right? I'm 51, right? So I remember literally waiting on, the evening news, and then maybe again at you may have a 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock news, right? So you're looking for the stories and what's going on, these days, by the time if you wait for a news story in terms of the traditional 5, 6, 10 o'clock news, is old news already, right? You getting it at your fingertips is right there, is old news in an hour, on to the next thing. So when you look at that, there's so much going on, like what was mentioning earlier, is that you have the media, you have so much coming at you fast, and there's not a way to process that. That's what we call a sensory overload. There's so much, right? So much coming. If you don't decipher, what's real from what's fake, and I don't mean in terms of what's fake, in the terminology of the fake news. I don't mean that. What I mean is what's real in terms of what matters, right? Because there's movies, there's always been movies, there's always been music, right? And art imitates life. It's just that it comes so fast, and if there's not a real way to process that, you have youth, and I say youth, not just the kids, because kids become adults. Now they grow in age, but maturity, they haven't really matriculated and became mature adults. They just become adults in age. So you take a kid that's watching this TV show on social media, music, and there's no way to really process that this is art, right? And maybe it's narrating in some cases. Not even rap. Rap get a negative. I mean, even when you say the word rap these days, it
Can
almost
I
has.
interject for a second?
Yeah,
Can you raise your stance a little bit? Yeah,
that's
yeah,
better.
that's perfect. Yes.
Okay, okay. I'm sorry about that. So anyway, I was explaining again. I don't want to get ahead of the interview, but the whole idea of this sensory overload, so much is coming at us, and if there's not, I mean, as adults, in most cases, we're rational. We can see what's actuality and what's just art, right? When you have kids that haven't really been adapted in terms they maladapted, right? They think they know, and they really taking the music, the TV, and everything they see in social media, and they taking it for face value, for exactly what it is, when some of it is just meant to be dramatization or meant to be art. But again, that's where parents, and that's where coaches, and that's where teachers come in to help to try to process some of that. And so that's what my book is all about, really trying to talk about those 5 principles of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision making, and making positive relationships. And that's the foundation, that's the pillars, the pillars of
Can you mention those five again?
yeah. So it starts with self-awareness, getting to know thyself, as we talked about, self-discovery. And then from self-awareness, we have what's referred to as self-management, self-control, right? So if I know myself, I can control myself, right? And then the third of those of the 5 is social awareness. How do I fit in with the larger
Social awakeness,
social awareness?
social awareness.
Yes,
Okay.
social awareness, right? And so these are the pillars of social emotional intelligence, or SEL, social emotional learning. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and then you have responsible, positive relationships, building those relationships that matter, right? Understanding what are relationships that would help you, get to the next level, get to where you need to be the best version of yourself, right? Positive relationship. Again, whether those relationships be in terms of social relationship, friendship, or in companionship, like for its marriage, right? So it's very important. And so of those, of the 5, again, we have social awareness, social awareness. Uh, um, I'm sorry, and I had a lapse. So
Self-awareness, self-control.
self-awareness, and then we have, once I know myself, and then I have self-management, I can control myself, right? And then from there, I have social, right? How do I fit in? Then I have those responsible decision-making skills, and then I can build positive relationships. So those are the 5 elements of social emotional learning.
Okay. I want to introduce and share with everybody some of your background. You have a master's from Prairie View University. I assume that's an education.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Okay. And you are also the CEO you're the CEO of Teach Another Inc. Tell us about that.
So Teach Another Inc. is a education consulting and behavior support services. And so just to put that in context, My background is uh, initially it was juvenile justice. So when I initially went to college, I it was criminal justice, and I got a bachelor's in criminal justice, and I went on to graduate school in criminal justice, concentration in juvenile justice. So I spent my early terms of my professional career as a juvenile probation, just working in juvenile probation and parole in the state of Louisiana. And so having doing that nearly 5 years, like they say, much knowledge come much sorrow. You know, I saw that there was systemic issues of in terms of I'm getting you as assigned to probation or parole, what have you, but the common denominator is it goes back to education, right? Lack of, you know, those pillars I just mentioned, right? The self-awareness. And so it was an opportunity, but yet by the time I get you on supervision, it was already court involved and the judge involved, but I didn't see where there was a real scaffolding of really addressing not just the crime in terms of why they on probation, or when I say crime or the delinquency, but really looking at what are the root causes, you know, what is it that youth may have missed. And so, but not a lot of opportunity, unfortunately, as in probation. And so I pivoted from the juvenile justice system to education. And so from there, I went to education and working in education. I wanted opportunity to be more than just, of course, boots on the ground, but I wanted to have some say so in terms of administratively, right? So I wanted to matriculate. And so that's how I pivoted from criminal justice and then to education. I went to Prairie View to get my principalship and, of course, education administration. And from there was some, and it'll take a whole nother podcast to really talk about some of the things that kind of allowed me, what I would say caused me to pivot from education in terms of being in the role of in terms of schools education. I went on into more of a advocacy role, and the advocacy role is what led me ultimately to start my own education consultant. So to take my experiences from that juvenile justice and education and where they intersect is what I do now as a consultant, to go in and to really help, you know, those that are dealing with those behaviors and how to really look at it again from the root cause. What is that's going on, and help schools, you know, kind of come up with, you know, some strategies to meet those needs of those students in that role, or in some cases more hands-on as a advocacy, in some cases dealing with parents to help with parents.
I want to talk about you. You mentioned root causes. I want to talk about root problems also. When my dad was in school, you know, he went to Prairie View in 1941. So it was a different world. They, in their minds, wanted to prove to the larger community that they deserved to be treated correctly because they were just as good as anybody else. So they were inspired, you know, I would say 75, 80, 95% of the young people were inspired unless something happened in their family. Most of them wanted to prove that they were just as good as the white boys and they could learn just as well. Now we have opportunity to learn. But with all the bombardment of things in our mind, we tend to say it's not cool to learn, it's not cool to be smart. And we are looking, I'm just saying, young people, I have 32 years of education also, so I have a little background. Um,
Mhm.
what do you attribute this mindset of the young people to, and what are some of the ways that we can start impacting them? Because that is the root problem. You mentioned that when you got involved, they were already on probation, already had, you know, things against them. How can we, you know, kind of start to change that? That's really an important thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, so when we look at like you say, some of the older generation, I just said the idea. I don't think there's anyone if you take a trip up to the penitentiary in any state, and you do some interviews, I don't think you would find anyone that set out to say, I don't care, right? I just want to blow my life, and I just want to just do whatever. I think most people, I would say, a very high percentage of people they set out to do something with their lives, right? But I think the disconnect is that many youth are not really taught, right? We say do good, but to really teach that whole deferred gratification piece. I think instant gratification versus deferred gratification is a missing. When I say missing piece, we know it exists in theory as a term, but who's really taking the time to teach? Because our society in the society we in, especially with social media these days, right? I mean, even social media highlights it, but it's been around. It's so much that goes on, and it seems that it's intensified with the availability of, literally on the phone, you can access so much. And so if you're looking at social media, you see everyone's highlight, and you're comparing your life, and you comparing to even adults, not just kids. And so to answer that question and say, what is it that needs to be instilled, or what do we go back, or what do we, try to reach the root cause of it? And I think it goes back to really understanding that as a concept, and really, the implementation of teaching deferred gratification. That it's okay that you don't have it now. What are we talking about? Tangibles? Are we talking about intellectually? Right? You don't know everything, right? No one is born knowing. Smart is not what you are, is what you become. So you're teaching that to kids whether that is okay. It's not okay to fail, so to speak, but it's okay to make a mistake. But let's get back up. Let's not think that you have to finagle and put up a facade like it's okay when it's really not okay. And if we teach that and really go back to those foundations, and so it's a lot easier said than done. We're talking about kids. You have a 5-year or 4-year, you're teaching it. But then to answer your question, how do we address those that's already, 13, 14, and they already been living that lifestyle, and being in a situation where they don't understand the importance of deferred gratification, put the work in and get the reward on the flip side of it, right? And so that's the challenge. How do we really address that? And it's a challenge across the board, all race, socioeconomic levels, but it's concentrated when we talk about minority. We talk about our youth, black kids. It's concentrated because we in areas, and when you see a lot of these social ills that are right before you, where it exists in all communities. Some communities are able to suppress it a little bit better, or there's other safety nets that it doesn't become a systemic or community problem. So, and I'm hoping that I'm putting that in perspective. I'm talking instant gratification and deferred. That's a discussion in itself, and I don't want to assume that everyone knows what that means in terms of that. So, if that makes sense, if I answer that question, at least from that perspective.
Yes, you answered it. I want to go into it a little more. We are taught in education that we start out as a blank slate, a tabarosa, they call it. And what that means is we are, we learn who we are, what we can become, and all of the possibilities. And, our teacher's role, our parents' role is to kind of guide us in to who we can become. But TV, peer pressures, different societal pressures come and bombard. That's why I started with that. Now, I would say from the time that TV started up until how it's gravitated today, it has not always put the best foot forward for young Black kids. Of course, you can look at that history in the Bill Cosby. He demonstrated a study where he showed about the Black kids and what doll that they would get. What doll is pretty. They always said the white doll is pretty. The children chose the white doll because that is the way their subconscious has been taught. And that is continued. Then you got other things like a direct attack like COINTELPRO and other things like that have happened. Now, today, moving to today, we have a lot of Black athletes, entertainers, professionals who have achieved, but it's still within our community a real. You can go to any city, you can see 25-year-old Black kids homeless on the street. I've been traveling a lot. I've seen it, and you still have in our schools a down mindset that doesn't attribute high education to high growth. And a lot and kids also say, I don't want to work at McDonald's. I got to have that money now. Going back to that point of instant gratification. Uh, there are so many things, as well as Countel Pro and other activities. Um, they affected the parents. We had a discussion on our sports show, and we talked about we used to have little leagues. We used to participate in little leagues, especially here in Houston, but not as much anymore. And they have gone away because parents have so much pressure on them. We used to be the focal points of the leaders of our kids. That has been the case, that it's affected our parents, and they do not have a comfort level to be able to help as much as they used to. Wouldn't you say that if we can help parents and get parents a little bit more help, and the mental health thing is important also. So how can we kind of strengthen our parents and to be able to help the kids?
Yeah, so when we think about the again, I use the term social ills, right? There's so much that exists. But when you look at it from a statistical perspective, there's many more kids that are not out using drugs. There's many more kids that's not out stealing cars or any of those things, or having being promiscuous, so many that are not than that are. But unfortunately, the negativity highlighted, right? And even if one is doing it, it needs to be addressed. But when it becomes where we put it as that's the norm, and you have a kid that because keep in mind, socialization, especially we're talking about teenage. I mean, from about 9, that 9 to 14, that whole that's a transition, right? There's a reason why they created theoretically elementary, because it used to be, remember, schools was just you start school and you go all the way up to 12, and then they that whole middle school years, so they came up with the concept of let's kind of separate, give that opportunity for those students to process. And so we take that the theory that's behind why middle schools was created, and understand that, and normalize that, things are happening, you're making transition. You don't have to go with the latest fad. You don't have to, the whole self-awareness, go back to that self-discovery. Take the time to get you to know yourself. It's not nothing to be embarrassed about if you don't know. Understand that it's a opportunity to become. And so when we're looking at that, and so to go back to your question, understanding that, and I didn't digress from it, or trying to put it in context. So because we see so much and we say that these things is going on, but there's so much that's not going on, but the negativity gets so much attention to the point where you have kids that are doing the right thing. Our society almost, I don't want to say it glorifies it, but even a well-intended principal, parent, or teacher, they speak louder, even if they're yelling about the negativity, versus really normalizing the thing that they're doing right. Because even the kid that does things they shouldn't, if you was to just really shatter them in a 24-hour span, you'll find that they did a lot more right things than they did wrong. It's just that the negativity gets so much attention, and if you compound it over years and years and years, some kids develop this sense of, so what's the use? It's almost become a hopeless situation. So our job as educators, as parents, coaches, is to understand that and really go back to I mean, I know it sounds cliche, and so we really hope pushes. We have to really push hope, really get back to understanding that our youth are dealing with so much these days that we don't have to harp on the negativity. We can highlight the positivity so much so that the negative become more of an echoes in the background. But we put the negativity on Front Street, and those students or those kids that really want to do right is that they become the feeling of more it's abnormal and they want to fit in, but our way of getting their attention is also like the negativity. They kind of seeking attention, but the negativity is getting more attention than the positivity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So on the one hand, we got to have more ways of putting out there the positive. So not necessarily other communities are going to put out the positive about our young people. So we got to have more points of uh, programs and different things that we control so that we can put out the positive and share the positive. And that's one thing that I hope develops over time. Let me go back to what you were talking about in the beginning. Uh, the first principle is self-awareness. Is that's true, right? Okay, somebody who hears us and they understand what we're talking about. What's the first way and the most important ways you would tell them to start climbing?
Okay, so the whole idea of climb, uplift, and build is, of course, the word climb is almost self-explanatory, but not quite. When we think of climb from what, right? Or where am I climbing to? And the idea is to climb above the influence, climb above the adversity that you may face as an individual first, right? Before we start looking at it collectively, let's look at, again, the man or the woman in the mirror first, or the kid in the mirror. Let's see, how do I, look at me and really see what it is that make me tick, right? What makes me upset? Or what makes me happy, to really study thyself, really to get to know yourself. And from a kid's perspective, I mean, it means one thing. And if you're talking about a teenager, you're talking about an adult, it has a different, it may look different, but it's the same. It's the underlining is still become a guru of self, right? Really get to know yourself, right? And so many, and we think of that as kids, but there's so many adults that, again, have, grew in age, but haven't really, grab the concept, right? And I'm guilty of it myself. Although I have a much better understanding now as an adult, the whole idea of writing the book was to things that I wish I had known when I was, 10 years old or 15 years old or 25, even as a young parent or a younger husband. So the idea is all of it still what I'm talking about, a 5-year-old kid learning what is best in that season of life, whether I'm talking about a 15-year-old learning what's best in that season, a 30-year-old learning what's best in the season. So the idea of self-awareness is understanding that we may all be the same in terms of humanity, but we different things affect us in different ways. But if I know myself, I'm in a better position, I have a higher probability of controlling myself. We use the word have some self-control. We use it very loosely, but I mean, you literally cannot control something that you don't know, right? How do I control it? And you expect it to happen haphazardly, that it's going to be through osmosis, is it going to happen? No, I don't know what I can really control is taking the time to get to know thyself. And it's an evolving thing. It's not I become self-aware and I'm done. No, it's a lifelong journey. And if we can take that as an adults and remember that and address kids in that same manner, that it's okay that you don't know, right? But we're gonna cure ignorance with knowledge, right? The only cure to ignorance is knowledge, to know. And ignorance is not even in our society, unfortunately, is a derogatory term. Ignorance just simply means, and you and I both know, lack of knowledge. If you don't know, then learn. And if you do know, the idea of climb is now we ready to uplift. So climb everything I just explained, and then, and again, I don't want to get ahead of it because I see that's probably what the next question was, but that's what it's about. So climb is all about, overcoming adversity or really positioning yourself to be on solid ground, right? To rise above whatever the influence is, whatever the whatever life may throw at you, whatever you may face, being in position to climb, get on solid ground so that you can ultimately build.
Get on solid ground, which takes self-evaluation. Now, some people, at least they present, um, they not everybody can be honest to themselves. I don't know if what they project to others is, okay, I want to just do it my way, but they see that way is not working. You have different things. People go through different things that, you have a narcissist who wants everything their way. Then you have people who are too shy to speak up. They know something is wrong, but they have too much, I guess, guilt or something that they have a difficulty speaking up, and people feel that they can mow over them and just, push their way. So it's a lot of personalities that people have, and I've been through many of them. But the key is to be honest with yourself. And then if you can be honest with yourself, you can arrive at a certain point where you can be okay with yourself, in my opinion. Do you agree with that? Hello? Are you still there? Look like we have a little difficulty here, but we are talking about climb, uplift, and build. Climb, uplift, and build, and we are discussing it. I'm sure we'll get Ron back in a second here. He talked about the 5 principles: self awareness, self-control, social awareness, then positive relationships. So we talking about things that will help you climb, uplift, and build. We were just continuing talking about the 5 principles of self-awareness, and I mentioned that one in context with climb, self-control, social awareness, which is number 3, then positive relationships. Positive relationships, talk about that. We hear the term, people will know who you are by who you're hanging with. So talk about positive relationships.
Okay, so positive relationships simply means to having the understanding of, again, it goes back to if I know myself, what is it that, because when we think about, say, positive relationships, so I guess the converse that would be negative relationships. So it's not about it being a negative relationship, but the positive, the idea of a positive relationship. What relationship is going to be in my best interest, right? And it's not just on a selfish tip of what can I extract, but what can I also give back. So positive relationships are those relationships that's going to be complementary, right? Those relationships that you're going to receive and you're going to be able to give, right? But that, again, there's no real building a positive relationship without those first 2 elements of knowing self and being able to manage self. And once I can get those, and now I can begin to see what relationship is going to be in my best interest, right? And so, for example, human beings, we all have that need, that sense of to belong, right? To be a part of something, right? So you take that kid that joined a gang, you take that kid who joined the football team. They both joined out of that same desire, that same need to belong to something. Probably the one that joined the gang, it was the path of least resistance. It was easier to get in the gang than it was to try out and have the skill level of being willing to work to join a football team or a debate team or whatever it may be, right? And so, but the underlining is still that need to belong to something.
Yeah, need to belong. Yeah, I understand that, and um, we have so many things that come into us. It's hard to figure out what the positive relationship is sometimes. Not necessarily just the person who is popular. The unpopular person can be also a person who you can gather things from. So understood, it's many different possibilities of positive relationships. It could be your teacher, your preacher, the man on the corner who is who is sweeping the street. You get a positive relationship out of him. We are having some technical difficulty. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're going to continue talking. And again, we mentioned the 5 pillars: self-awareness, self-control, social awareness, positive relationships. I was
I'm
just
so sorry, man.
continuing. I know we have some technical difficulties, but we're going to work it out.
Yeah.
We're going to work it out. And so we have self-awareness, self-control, social awareness, positive relationships, and that's 4. Is there a 5th one?
And the fifth is so we have the positive relationship, then we say responsible decision making would be the fifth element.
Responsible decision making.
Yes, sir.
That is such a key. Responsible decision making. I mean, that's one that you and I still grapple with today. You know, in our conversations with people, we still want to have a positive interaction. And, you know, I reflect back, okay, did I handle that right? Was my tone wrong? Was my feedback wrong? I
Mhm.
go through that. So responsible decision making is very, very important. And everybody goes through it, of course. Uh,
Mhm.
and everybody should reflect on, you know, what they did. I try to always be accountable, even if I did wrong or
Mhm.
did right. And that's what we're talking about, I guess, responsible decision making. Explain what you mean by that.
Okay, and I know we having a technical difficulty. I don't know in terms of when I was explaining the relationship piece, and I know
Okay.
it, and when it cut off, and I was continuing because it was froze. I didn't know it was had stopped. But what I was trying to explain, and I don't know if I got this far. That's why I'm reiterating.
Okay. Okay.
Terms of I was talking about you having that need, that sense of belonging, right? And I mentioned about a kid that joined a gang or football team. Was I still on when I was discussing that? Or had it cut?
Okay. You got into I would say the first quarter of that. So if you continued after that, share what you said.
Okay, and so what I was just trying to explain that that kid or that youth, again, the one that joined the football team versus the one that joined the debate team or the basketball team, is the need is the same, the sense of belonging, of being a part of something, right? The relationship, right? The difference is one may be the path of one choose the path of least resistance. What I mean is it's probably easier to join a gang or a clique, right, versus join a debate club or football team, something that requires more commitment and right, more sacrifice on your part. And so human nature, we're wired that way, right? We have to be taught to choose the because the Bible says the path that's least traveled is the narrow road, right? And again, not being religious versus the road to folly is wide, right? And so it's easier to travel because you can almost unconsciously travel to do wrong. It's human nature. But to do right and to really seek and really to get after something requires a level of commitment. And again, whether we talking about a kid or we talking about a husband, right? Going out in society, making a conscious decision to be faithful, right? And I know a lot of time publicly we say these things and we want to act like it's oh no, not me, but we all have different things that we have to consciously make a decision every day, right? And the more you do it, of course, it become, easier, right? In terms of your level of commitment is there. And so what I mean by that is understanding relationships have to be fostered, right? Have to be, you develop relationship. We use the word you develop. And when you develop, you have to nurture it to make sure that it's in your best interest, right? And we're talking about kids, again, hanging out with certain groups. And you hear parents always say, watch who you're hanging around with. And your grandmother always said, show me your company, I'll tell you who you are, right? And so we teaching kids, but again, it's not just to the kids. It's easy to say to kids because as adults, we want to all act like we know this already. However, our actions don't show that we know this, right? So we have to be willing to, one, stand corrected, two, being accepting that constructive criticism so that we can be intentional about those relationships. And so that ultimately leads from the relationships to the responsible decisions, right?
I want to talk about the nuance of relationships in the context that, okay, I joined a church and the church was good and so forth, but anywhere you could be, you could have people that don't necessarily have your particular best interests at heart, not blaming the church or your pursuit of God, but that's human beings. And you can all now, for the most part, everybody was good. But what I'm trying to share is that you can find positive relationships and negative relationships in any sphere. So
Yeah.
it's not just because you hear everybody going to be good, or
Hmm.
because you hear everybody's going to be bad. So
Right.
uh, what we got to come to is what the fifth one is: responsible decision making wherever you are.
Hmm.
But the possibility that you're going to find more good in the church, in my opinion, is there, and the possibility that you're going to find more negative in the game is there also. So
Right. Probability. Yeah. Yeah.
you agree with that?
Absolutely. Very good point. So when you're looking at it through those lenses, again, I was saying earlier, we talk about positive relationships, and it seems the converse would be negative, but it's not necessarily a negative relationship. It's more about, is it complementary relationship? Is the relationship complementary, right? Again, it's give and take, right? It's not all about extracting what you can get from it, but it's also about what can you contribute as well. And so we look at those positive relationships is in a way of saying, is this relationship complementary, right? Is it complementary or is it complicated? And so we make those decisions, those positive decisions based on that. Like you said, if I'm looking at it, I'm running with, we use the word gang and not just gang in terms of a street gang, but you're running with cliques and groups of people, a friendship, so to speak, that's not complementary. That's not really in your best interest because you're not making, again, the best decisions, and that person is not holding you accountable, or you're not in a position to hold them accountable. Then you have to reevaluate whether or not that relationship is complementary. That's what it comes to. So I'd say a synonym for the positive relationships is complementary relationship. Is that relationship complementary to you? Or is it complicated? That's the key word. I mean, that would be the key concept, and to evaluate. And as an adult, it's our responsibility to evaluate that. And as someone that's in charge of whether you're talking about a coach, a parent, are you holding those that you're accountable for? Are you holding them accountable to make sure that those relationships are complementary versus complicated, right? And if it's complicated, is there a way to pivot that to allow it to grow, to become a more of a positive or complementary? And if there's no way, no route for that, then it's time to evaluate whether or not this is a relationship that you should maintain. Hope that.
Um, Number two in your title of your book, Climb, Uplift, and Build, is uplift. And uplift does not mean everybody's going to agree with you, does it? How do you factor what uplift is in that context? Not everybody's going to agree with you, but they can be beneficial. So how do you explain uplift as far as helping the person grow?
Yeah, so the idea of uplift is, again, so if climb is to overcome the adversity and to climb from, whatever it is that may have been a barrier in your life, or whatever, it may look different from person to person, but the idea of climbing, once you get to a place of stability, the responsibility, once you get to stability, your responsibility is to uplift others, right? Uplift those around you, those that you have some level of commitment to. So in terms of the book, the idea of uplift is once you in position, right? You have a responsibility to the thing that you are attached to or around. You shouldn't leave it the same way you found it. You have a responsibility, and so it goes back to that that complementary relationship, right? And if you're not uh, 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 doing something, again, I use the phrase of it shouldn't be left the same way you found it. Should be something different from your involvement, from your getting involved to any capacity, it should be better than it was when you came into it, right? That's the idea of a complementary relationship, if that makes sense. So that at the end of the
That
day,
makes
the
sense.
uplift piece is all about what is it that you can do to make it better, to help others out. And all of the time it's not going to always be monetary, right? It's not going to always be tangible, right? Some of it may be did 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 you help a person become to develop more of a peace, right? Did you help them overcome fears? What is it that you doing in terms of making their life or making this community or whatever it may be? We talking about a person, we talking about a group, we talking about a school. The uplift piece is once you in position, once you climb, it doesn't stop because if it was all about climbing, Bill, and then that key element of that uplift piece is missing, right? And if you spinning your wheels, if it's all about what I can accumulate, then we missed it all together, right? And so the idea of uplift is what can I contribute? How can I make this we say the world, how can I make the world a better place? And that's so lofty, right? But that's like, how do I make my community? How do I make my home better first, right? If I can make my home better, I can make my neighborhood better. If I can make my neighborhood better, we can make our city better, our state, and so on and so forth. And we all had that mentality, right? And I wanted to be over, so to speak, with people over optimistic. That's not what it is. I'm about being realistic about what can I do, and as opposed to just let's make the world a better place. Yeah, we can all say that. That's like saying if I had $1 million, then I'll give this. No, if you have $10, what are you willing to do with the 10 you have? Because if you give 5 cents out of the 10, then you probably if you had 100,000, maybe you will help homeless. Or, a lot of us like to say certain things. So long story short, it's all about the uplift piece is what are you willing to do to leave institutions, families, individuals better than you found them?
And sometimes it could just be time given, and you can be there to support somebody with a hug that they may like that or feel that more than even you giving them $10 or some flowers.
Right.
It's according. And I understand the concept that you were talking about, and I'm sure our audience are gathering that also.
Mm-hmm.
Building. Uh, Building can be, in my understanding, quite a few things. It can be tangible, but it can be a foundation, an organization,
Mm-hmm.
um, a family, which
Mm-hmm.
is basically an organization that can cover generations. If you present a firm foundation and your son, daughter carry on in your mindset and ideal
Mm-hmm.
and enhance it. Donald Trump's father, he started a foundation or he started a family and a way of life, and Donald Trump has continued it. I mean, that is a wild example, of course, but it's a true example. Everybody may not agree with where he has built this foundation, but or he has built that part of his family, but it's true, and we can do that also. And is that some of the things you're talking about with Bill?
Yeah. So the idea again of build is to build better individuals, right? A better individual can become better families, right? And better families can make better communities, right? And better communities can make better environments and make better cities. And so the whole idea it starts with the individual first, right? And then collectively we can uplift others, right? Because there's strength in numbers, right? I literally have a vested interest in helping those around me because in essence, if I can help those around me, perhaps they can help me further the agenda, right? And do the things that I set out to do. So it's not of a selfish motive, but at the same time, some of it is when you're talking about building, it's in your best interest to because otherwise you'll find yourself carrying weight that's, as you know, again, there's strength in numbers, right? If I can help you, then we can help, right? We can help each other, right? So if we have two, and two can become four, and so on and so forth. So the whole idea of building, again, it's not just a tangible build, it's about building better individuals that ultimately we can build a better society, right? And I do understand it from a perspective of so much is going on in the society that we in, right? And there's a saying that said that it's some dark times, and it is, and I don't want to minimize that, but I also believe that the darkness is not the force; it's merely the absence of light, right? And so those of us that know better and do better and really don't subscribe to, I mean, a lot is going on. I mean, a lot is going on in our society, right? However, we have a responsibility as those that are enlightened, right? And again, not to be religious, but as believers, the hope, we can't lose hope. We can't subscribe to the darkness that is the situation is, we're going to they say going to hell in a handbasket, the old, like the old folks used to say. If we as believers and those that are enlightened, if we miss it, right, and we become, if we echo that, right, then who's going to carry the torch? Who's going to shine the light, right? Because remember, a little light can illuminate a whole lot of darkness. Literally, if you hit every light, in the room right now, and that little light from your cell phone can illuminate across the room, right? And all that darkness. And so, although that seems to be such a little bit of light, against so much darkness. Remember, the darkness is not the force, it's merely the absence of light. And I say that wholeheartedly and very intentional, because that's the goal, right? And that's, it's easier just to talk about it, but the challenge is, how do we convey that in a way that it shifts, that it brings about a change. And that starts with not allowing ourselves to succumb to the dark, to succumb to the feeling of hopelessness, right? And if you watch the media just in the last 2 weeks, as you mentioned, the president, I mean, just with the executive orders on this, and I'm not being political one side or the other, but there's so much going on that it has to be a voice of balance. There has to be a voice of hope. Otherwise, if we find ourselves, those of us that once, push hope and what was the light, and we allow our lights to be dim, and that's happening collectively across. And then it's really, the dark times we talk about will really be dark, right? But we have a responsibility to stand tall in the face of the adversity. So that's the idea of building, right? And so again, it's not just building, the tangibles, about, what are we going to do to push the hope, to really be that beacon of light in these times, in these challenging times.
And I look at building as something that will be here maybe 100 years from now. That it's a family, a, a institution, an organization. You building something that has that can maintain some light, and it can go into the future and live beyond you. I look at it in that context. Let me ask: do you have a book there with you? You can hold up.
Yeah. Can you
All
see
right.
it?
Okay. Bring it a little closer. Push it a little closer. Okay, that is Climb, Uplift, and Build. And my brother Ron Angeletti. How old is the book? I mean, how many months has it been out?
The book was published and released back in October. I think we had the book signing like early October. So that's maybe 4 months now, roughly.
Yes.
So
All right. Beautiful and eye-catching and conversational cover, and it says a lot. Can you share what you were trying to say with that cover, with the kids walking up the steps to the brother, the teacher at the top? Can you share
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so the illustration, the goal was to, give an illustration that speaks to, the whole concept of the book. And so with the illustration, a lot of the question I get a lot is, oh, so it's a children's book because of the illustration is what's what you call it, not cartoon, but it's it's kind of in a way that, okay, you at first glance it's a children's book, but it's not a children's book, but it is for children. But the book works best in tandem for mentees and mentors, mentees, right? Coaches and players or parents and their kids. So I wrote the book in a way, and I want to illustrate here the idea of the steps. Each one of these steps represent those pillars, those elements of social emotional learning. The first being a self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible, positive relationships, and then ultimately, if you can get those, and you can build, you can make positive relationships. I'm sorry, if you can get those four elements, then you can make those positive decisions or make those responsible decisions. So the illustration was even someone that if it's a kid that can't really read yet, so to speak, if it's grade school, they can see the book. The idea they will be encouraged that I too can go from here to here. And so on the back of the cover, you see a little kid looking into the mirror, but what he sees in the mirror
Ah,
is pointing back to him of what he could become, regardless of what he's faced with, what he's dealing with
yeah,
at the time. So the idea of that part was to lend hope, to say no matter what it is you're going through right now, this too shall pass, and you can overcome whatever it is that you face. And again, and so the idea of the adult leading the way
that
in front.
that is profound there. Yes, that's
Mhm.
profound. Hey, can you share some of the chapters or some of the main points that we can quickly discuss? We can
Yeah,
quickly
yeah.
share with our
So
audience.
yeah, so the book is in a way, it's so in chapter one it opens up. Before we even get into the chapters, I just give a very brief summary of who I am as a person, to talk about. Again, it's not intended to be a narrative, but just about my life. But I give credibility to my humble beginnings. Some of the challenges I faced as in elementary and middle school. Ultimately, dropping out of high school. I dropped out of high school at the age of 17, and I returned at the age of 19. I ultimately graduated from high school with my diploma at the age of 21. And from there, I went on to college, and so the rest is history in terms of that. But I share a little bit that I too, found myself make some of those poor decisions, right? Not really knowing, when talking about self-awareness, not really. Now, I don't want to minimize it. I did have parents. That I was taught some of the things that I should have been taught, but the folly was in my poor decision making, right? Not really taking heed to some of it. And so ultimately, uh, it led to some of my academic deficiencies, and then some of the social awareness of that, being aware of being behind and not knowing certain things. And so I pivoted. And when I dropped out, it wasn't the tradition. I just don't want to go to school. I wanted to, do something and try to get myself in a better situation. But being 17 and not having enough credits to probably even be classified as a sophomore, when really you should be getting ready for graduation. It was a light that came on, but it was a feeling of overwhelm that I wanted to try to figure out what else I can do to kind of, pursue to get out and ultimately do something. So I went to Urban League, had a program called Street Academy in New Orleans at the time. I found out about it, and I withdrew from my high school and went to this program, and the concept of the program was good, but it was really what I found out going. It was more of a program that was kind of created, in a lot of the, like the juvenile courts would mandate, some of those students that may have been detained in detention and whatever the situation was. And so it was a school like that, and it was more of a disciplinary, and it just wasn't, credit to the concept of it, but it really wasn't something that I found beneficial at the time, and I was kind of just going through the motions. So ultimately, after seeing, my brother graduate from high school, and me and my brother pretty much same age for a month or so, we 11 months apart, and so having some of the same peers and being in school together, but ultimately seeing my mother being so excited and so proud of my brother graduating, and then my reality, it wasn't until seeing that I had accepted that I was a dropout. Before then, I was, I was in school, although I was in alternative, not alternative, but it was considered alternative school. I wasn't mandated to be there. I was trying to, take a shorter route to ultimately get a GED or something to help, trying to get my life started. But I realized that it wasn't it, and it was the embarrassment to self, not to society, because no one knew. 'Cause I was able to socially maneuver, and no one probably didn't even know. A lot of the peers probably didn't realize even that I was, overage. I'm, not really. 'Cause in high school, you can maneuver in a way. It's not like elementary where if you're in fourth grade or third grade and you get retained, and it's obvious because your peers going to. But in high school, it's credit, so you still in some of the same PE electives, and so you still with your peers, so to speak. So you're maneuvering, but the manifestation of that, when graduation time coming, folks are graduating. So when my brother graduated, again, see my mother being very excited, but then seeing also the disappointment that my dad really expressed, right? My mom never really expressed the disappointment, I guess, out of, just, that's mom, right? So never had that tough discussion of letting me know. So my reality was in doing that time, and without being long-winded, first time I heard the words that, that I was a dropout. And I mean, that was my reality. I was a dropout. And so from that summer of when my brother graduated in 92, I believe it was, and I spent that summer to really, and the light come on in terms of I need to do something different. So from there, again, without getting into the long details of it, I returned to high school, 17. I remember returning at 19. I stopped at 17, returned at 19. Spent the next 2 years a really uphill battle of really challenging myself, to really get, reading comprehend all of those deficiencies that was evident. It was manifested that I just was behind. I just didn't know because I put myself in a situation. Spent those next 2 years to really get serious about it, and ultimately I graduated at the age of 21.
I think there's a difference in the student and the young men today. That same young man that dropped out at 17 and was instant gratification a little bit a part of it. You seeing things around you wanted to participate in and you wanted to do it now as opposed to waiting. But the young men today uh, they would continue down the road. I'm not saying all of them, but
Mm-hmm.
very few would have had the strength to overcome any type of embarrassment.
Mm-hmm.
I know you say that you just fit in, but the kid today would say, "No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go through that. I don't want them looking at me or anything." They would say that. They do not have as much ability to withstand any type of negative peer pressure or criticism. But you also had your parents and you had the example of your brother. Those things factored in also. I'm not sure that that a student today would go through and face those things. I just wanted to say that I was the last student that did not have to go to summer school. They wanted to put me in special education class.
Mm-hmm.
My dad wouldn't let him. I was a very bad student. I mean, no, very bad class. I was very smart, uh, even back then. The teacher said, put up 25 cents, and whoever wins the 25 makes the best test score gets all the money. I always won that. I always won that. I can always read. I tell my son today that you can change a whole lot of things if you read and retain and you learn
Mm-hmm.
to write. Uh, our kids do not have the patience as much as they need to be able to go through that. That's why I taught him how to play chess. Uh, he hasn't got all the examples or all the benefits of learning the game and the patience. However, he can beat me 1 out of 8 times, and
Mm-hmm.
that is good. And I hope that he eventually learns the lessons that I tried to teach, as well as his mother. And he can. He had to go back to school and get his GED, and we're still trying to work with him today. He'll be 26 on his next birthday.
Mm-hmm.
We are toward the end, but I want you to please share what are the main points of climb, uplift, and build, as well as what you would like to share with our audience and that they could take with them as a lesson for their understanding for our conversation.
Okay, so as I explained, so with the book, I wrote the book to be in a way that's against it's best in tandem against having that adult to hold accountable that youth, right? And so because of that, and really taking in the feedback that I get from the book and getting, although the cover, as I mentioned, it looks like kids' book, but the book has proven not to be such in a way you can just give it to a kid and say, go and read it and implement it. It's more about, it's more like a facilitator's guide. So because of that, taking that feedback, I actually I'm working on, I mean, I'm pretty much near the completion of two workbooks that directly coincide with the book. I have one for elementary level and I have one for middle school level, right? So the workbooks are very hands-on activities to take these concepts and take what I'm saying here in this book, take those 5 elements, and it's really broken down to hands-on activities that would allow. Now, the workbooks is something that you can give to the kid, right? I mean, say, because you're discussing it with them, these concepts. But again, it's concepts here, but the workbooks is that more hands-on. And so I wrote the workbooks in hopes of getting the kids really involved, because I firmly believe the sooner we can expose kids to these concepts, they're really teaching that self-awareness piece. And a lot of the things that we see in a lot of the social ills, a lot of the issues that we're seeing is going to be corrected because a kid or person that knows themselves and understand the larger a picture of it won't make some of those decisions. They won't go down the path, right? You'll make some mistakes, but you just have a different take on it. It's like I mentioned earlier, I made some poor decisions, but I had a foundation. Don't get me wrong. That even the Bible says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they're older, they won't depart from it, right? They may go astray, right? But when you have a foundation, you have something to come back to, right? And so even when you make poor decisions, you do something, it's out of a it's not out of a lack of knowing, it's out of a lack of doing, right? But when you have a foundation, you have that. So credit to my parents. I had parents. I don't make any excuses to say I was, my environment breeded this and I wound up doing this. Yeah, there's some things that happen in the environment. Things could have been better, hopefully, but I don't make excuses about it. I try to take that and what I wish I had known and try to again put it in the book, or even when I was a teacher in actually in the classroom or in any programs doing any type of, I always keep that in the forefront of my mind of what it must be like, right? Because even though I can say I'm African American, I was 10 years old before, and so I know what you're going through. I can't say that because I wasn't 10 years old in 2025, right? I wasn't in certain environments, so I have to always take that in consideration when you're dealing, to be sensitive and have enough empathy to say, yes, maybe I can resonate with what you're going through, but I can't be arrogant enough to say, I know what you're going through. This is what you need to do. I first need to help understand what it is you're dealing with and help you understand yourself best so that you can deal with it. And it's more imperative these days than it was even just a few months ago, obviously, right? I mean, we're talking about a threat to, and again, not even getting the political discussion, we're talking about Department of Education. Now, should there be some changes, some correction? I'm a firm believer, yes, there need to be. But in terms of, I understand as a special education professional, understand that the teeth of IDEA, right, special education law, is the federal government, right? If you strip that away and then you leave states and you leave school districts in it based on what state you're in, and now we're going to have some level of inequality just based on locale, where you live, what service you're going to get. So I don't subscribe to this whole idea of just shutting it down. I do think there need to be some changes, but I'm only going into that right now, not even to be about the political side of it, saying it's even more imperative these days to really teach at home, to make it at a point as parents or as those that are responsible for kids, right? And unfortunately, we don't have enough parents that's really involved. I don't want to use the word we don't have enough parents. We do have parents that are involved, but too many of us are relying on the school system. We rely on someone else to instill certain values in our kids. It's more imperative these days to have not just my book, but to making sure you're doing your part to instill and scaffold those skills in those kids before they hit the schoolhouse before they go out into community. That's not the time. It's like the old saying, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. It's not time to watch game film on game day, right? You watch a game film weeks before the game, you know who your opponent is, you know what you're facing, and you may have a better probability of defeating whatever you face with if you took the time to practice and to study that. So the same concept here, if we taking the time with books like this, we climb, uplift, and build, or go out and do your research as a parent, what is it that I can instill in my kids, and not just my kids, but those that I'm responsible, those that I say I love, to give them a game plan, to give them at least something that they're not just deer in the headlights when it's happening. And now we're dealing with this whole idea of Department of Education being dismantled, schools, and then we have the whole diversity, inclusion, and equality. All of those things. Again, not even making this political. We're dealing with a lot that's going on. It should be a wake up, right? It should be a clarion call to say we have a responsibility in. And again, as an advocate, I'm an education advocate for all races, all socioeconomic status, but I have to be real, it's a concentration of these issues in our communities, right? And if we don't wake up, or we don't do something about it, I don't mean just do something in terms of whine and complain about what some decisions other people are making. What are we doing to make sure that before our kids dot the door, so to speak, that we giving them, we scaffolding some of those skills in terms of, before we get to the math, science, social studies, let's make sure they have the social skills they need to make the decisions, so that when they find themselves in challenging and in adversity, they're more likely to make better decisions. So credit to my mom and my parents that even though my mom couldn't explain anything about social emotional in terms of the terminology, but she was ahead of the curve, before, is if as she knew it, she understand it, she understood the importance of teaching us to be self-aware, teaching us to know who you are, and don't make decisions based on what others are doing. You need to do what's in your best interest. If you're saying you want to do this, doing that is not likely to get you where you say you want to be. So make better decisions. So she understood all of these concepts, although her approach to it may have been different because she didn't have so-called a research that go with it, but she was ahead of it because again, her foundation was biblical principles. So everything here is definitely biblical principles, although it's not scripture quoted, so to speak, because I don't want the book to be a barrier to going into schools because it's promoting religion. That's not what it is. But these concepts, right? These elements are definitely, no doubt, biblical principles. So I don't want to be long-winded with that, but my heart and passion, and I know we had some technical difficulties, some things I may was trying to convey, communicate, may have got lost because signals literally fading. But if I can say something to drive the point home, what it's all about, it's my effort to take my humble beginnings, my adversity I faced, that I was able to overcome by the grace of God, and do my part to communicate that. I've always tried to communicate that as an educator, whether it was in schools or whether it was dealing with the juvenile justice system. And I have an opportunity to put it in a book, right? It's a very small book, only 100 and, very small in terms of that, but very impactful, right? Very impactful in terms of the concepts that are here that can be built on, to take this as a foundation and do your part to first incorporate it in your own life, and then those that you are responsible for to really do your part to try to give them the tool that they're going to need. See it as a tool. That's the best way to describe it. This is a tool, and the workbooks that are going to be out hopefully within the next 2 weeks, available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well. It's going to be more of a hands-on, and hopefully I can follow up with you and make sure we can circle back when the workbooks drop. Again, I stand behind the book, with everything in me, although, the book is for sale. However, if someone out there that, heard something I said and maybe want to take a shot at the book, and you get the book and it's not really what you said it was, I personally would refund. I would take the book from you. I'll buy the book back from you, because again, it's not just about a book to make money. Of course, I wrote a book to sell books and hopefully to make money from my labor, but it's so much more about how do I contribute? What can I do to uplift others? And I feel that I can reach the masses in a book, more than I can just through my platform of speaking. So that's what the book is all about. So I hope that I made that point clear, at least at the end of it, even though, throughout we had some technical difficulty. That's my heart, that's my passion, and that's what I try to give to you.
Well, it's been a very powerful conversation. And I just want to say my background says life is a beautiful struggle. And some people look at the world, bottle is half full, and it is half full, but you can look at the top half as the beautiful half, or you can look at the bottom half as the dark half. I say let's look at the beautiful things that you was mentioning about concentrating on on the positive, not the negative.
Right.
Yes, there is always going to be negative. It always has been, but it's always, even in the slavery days, the slaves, they came up with the songs and the different things, and they were able to accentuate that little bit of positive that they had. And so you can always find a way to look at the sunny side of things. And it's been a powerful conversation. And I want to just share self-awareness, self-control or self-management, social awareness, positive relationships, and responsible decision-making are the keys to uplift, climb, and build.
Absolutely.
And it's been a powerful conversation. Any last word?
Nah, thank you, man. I really appreciate what you do with the way you use your platform. And again, that would be the epitome of the whole idea of climb, uplift, and build. Using your platform to uplift others, right? Giving information, bringing on folks like myself just to share, what it is that I have to share, and others. I had the opportunity to watch a few of your shows, a few of the panels, and again, I commend you for taking this opportunity with your platform to try to make this world a better place. To the
Well,
extent that.
I thank you very much, and we look forward to you sharing our upcoming panel with us. We're going to talk a little bit about what is the meaning of life, from all different aspects, how people look at it, and what is that meaning? What are we here for? So it's going to be very interesting. Also, I do a sports program, Sunday Five Side with Jeff Walker, which is every other Friday. So we talk sports. Source Seeker Hour is our current event show. And then we have a mental health show, Minding Our Mental Wellness. I'm the facilitator, and it's led by counselor Jennifer Kane, who's a professional counselor. So we're trying to do something in the community. And I thank you for watching, and I thank you out there in the audience for watching. Well, everybody, we at the end of our show. Drop Ron Angeletti a line. Go get his book. Go get his book, Climb, Uplift, and Build. And give him a line. Tell him what you think about the interview, or read the book and then give him a comment. And we will see you next time in upcoming shows. We look forward to it. He'll be on our show, which is the 13th of February. And so come check him out then. This is the Spotlight, Source Seeker Spotlight. And I thank you. We'll see you next time, everybody.